All right. So about 3 years ago, I received a phone call from an unknown caller who turned out to be an executive at a big telco in Sweden, the business unit for one of the world's biggest telcos. And he said that, Joakim, we have a problem. Okay, interesting. I'm listening. Not sure still why you're calling me. Our core IT systems crashed, and it was a hell pulling it back together and getting it all started again. And it showed us a lot of problems that we had. Okay, I was still thinking it's been quite a while since I touched code or IT systems in that sense, so not sure why he's calling me. But as Jerry Weinberg has taught us, everything's a people problem. So scratching the surface, I learned that, yeah, it's kind of we outsourced most of our IT development. So now when we scrambled to solve these problems, we were in the hands of our outsourced partners and couldn't do much. We found that our organization has too many coordinators and very few engineers. Duh. And replanning upon replanning, no idea what's being developed, when it will be done, no transparency. We've heard it all before. So, okay, I got it. You have problems. You have problems that I've seen solutions to. I can probably help you. But yeah, it's still not that exciting. I've seen this happen a lot, and I've also seen companies not really wanting to change things. They only want to do some small changes, and nothing will really last. But he went on and said, and by the way, we have a really unhealthy organization. The closer people are to IT, the less engaged they are, the worse it turns up in our employee measurements. Okay, now I was starting to get a little bit interested, because my mission in this industry is to improve the world of work and to really help people be more engaged and happy and passionate about their work. So yeah, this is something I feel I could do. When I stopped consulting several years back, when I joined Spotify as an employee, I was fed up. As I said to my friends, I don't want to help big companies suck a little bit less. But I come back on that, and actually there's a lot you can do to raise the spirits and improve things, even if it's just a little, in big organizations. So I kind of like the challenge. But then it topped it all off with, of course, Google is coming. So Google wants to rule the world. They want to rule the world of telcos. They asked us, we only need 3 APIs. You can still manage all the hardware and network. Don't worry, but we want to have the interaction with the customer. So this is a real threat. Okay, awesome. This is something you can work with, right? Now we have a sense of urgency. And I don't believe that I would take an assignment helping a company with a lean agile transformation unless they really had a sense of urgency, unless, like in this case, the executive team or people on the executive team, the C-suite, were actually willing to take a chance on this. They see the urgency and they see the need for it. So this talk is kind of focused around the story of my journey with this company over 2 years. And I called it Agile Transformations using the Spotify model, Lessons from the Trenches, a flirt with Henrik's, my colleague's famous works, Scrum and XP from the Trenches and Lean from the Trenches. If you haven't read them, you should definitely have a look at them. Yeah, but it's also informed by, well, let's say 6.5 years of familiarity with the Spotify model, so to speak, from having co-developed it from the inside, from around the time when we were only 8 teams at Spotify till 200 when I left. I was involved in all the discussions and meetings where we came up with things like tribes and chapters and squads. So I like to believe that I have a pretty good knowledge about Spotify, and I've also been teaching an Agile scale inspired by Spotify course publicly and in-house 30, 40 times together with my other colleague, ex-colleague now, Jimmy Sundén, and worked with other clients, done assessment, advisory roles, and so on. And also a lot of experience from different CRISP colleagues goes into these talks, as well as learning throughout the years, and been speaking at conferences and networking and so on Spotify and Spotify's approach. So I've come in touch with a lot of different companies. So even though the story is built around Telenor and their journey, it's also a knowledge and experience from other parts as well. So the number one lesson, I guess, is then have a sense of urgency. And you found some of these are pretty general, not just for a Spotify model, but agile transformations. And pretty well known, but still apparently not well known enough that people are doing it the right way. So definitely worth repeating. So, but bear with me if you've heard this before, and there will probably be some more specifics later on. Okay, so the first thing, a lesson that I've learned that I think is valuable is exactly what this executive did, bring in help. There's a big chance if you're in a traditional bureaucratic plan-driven organization and you're about to do a lean agile transformation or a big change journey, that you don't have a lot of the competence needed in your own company. You probably have some here and there, but you could really use someone who has been doing this before, who knows what it looks like, who can hold your hand and guide you and have this different perspective. And there's also this thing of, well, this is so old knowledge, there's even, Bible passages about it, like you can't be the prophet of your own home country, familiarity breeds contempt, and so on. It can be hard to be a change agent when you've been part of the status quo for quite some time. But don't get too dependent on the help. Develop your own capabilities too. Don't view this as something, okay, someone will come from the outside, they will teach us what to do, just train us, and then all the knowledge will have been transferred, and we can now just move on. No, I'd say that as soon as you identify that you need help and that you're bound on doing this transformation or making this journey, you really need to start developing your own capabilities as well. Consultants should be there to help you help yourself, not to do the work for you. And then really try to engage everyone. One of my current favorite books, the Kotter and many others on change, of course, the classics. But I feel not a lot of people have seen this one that I really like, by a couple of really seasoned McKinsey consultants of all people. Beyond Performance 2.0, a lot of research and science around big change programs. Where you can see that people who feel that they have co-created a solution feel 5 times more ownership than those who are told the solution. And I think also the idea that we would roll out or implement in a top-driven, top-down fashion, a method or a way of working that's basically around empowerment is kind of ironic, right? And when I say everyone, it's not just IT, it's not just a project. If you believe that lean agile transformation is just for IT, you get a surprise coming. For me, it's really about bridging the gap, integrating business and IT. If that's the situation you're in today, that you actually have a separation. And it's not just a project. It's not something you do a lot of training and then it's done. It's embarking on a journey that really has no end, I would say, but more on that later. So how do you engage everyone? One way is to really develop vision and principles. Don't bother reading all of this, but to drive home the point, there's some science to support it. 3,000 executives were asked, if your company undertook the change program again, what would you do differently? 48% picked set clearer targets. And it turns out that change programs that have clearly defined aspirations are 3 times more likely to succeed than when neither is defined. And to me, it's also around if you really, I mean, if you don't have a vision, if you're just, oh, we're going to do a lean agile transformation because we need to get smarter, and everyone else is doing it, you're bound to meet resistance, and people are like, I don't see the point. Why are we doing this? But if you can really tie it to a vision, principles, and a sense of urgency, like we need to become better at understanding the customer. We need to focus more on the customer needs. We need to be able to get our things out to the market faster. We need to innovate more. Very few people will say, no, I don't agree. I don't want to do that. Agile, lean agile methods, principles, way of working is just a tool, a method, a way of getting to your true vision and principles. Once you get people to understand, buy into, and commit to vision and principles, which is probably easier, there's no stopping the kind of creativity and innovation. All the things that they will come up with in order to be able to fulfill this vision and principles, things that go beyond your sprint plannings and daily stand-ups and all the things that you're thinking about in your lean agile transformation. And how can we, if we can really engage people and leverage all that creativity and innovation around the vision and the sense of urgency, there's probably no stopping the transformation. But also do this iteratively. This is not a waterfall project, right? You don't put the vision up front and communicate it from the top and down. No, this is also something we learn, and we do double loop learning, meaning that we also need to constantly question the goals and the reasons and the why we're doing this, depending on what we find. And for to really engage everyone and involve everyone, it has to be done in this way. And you probably have a fairly good idea on why you're starting the journey when you embark on your lean agile transformation journey. But as you start doing it and you learn more and you engage more people, you will learn new things, and you will learn that you probably were not ambitious enough in some areas, and you could be, maybe you were too ambitious in other areas. So be prepared to change. But also understand where you are. This is a quote that's often attributed to Einstein, but I don't think that's true. But it's a good one anyway. If I had only 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. Again, the problem is probably we are not lean agile. And if you go out there and say, we need to transform, we need to become lean agile, we need to introduce SAFe or Scrum or whatever, why? Well, to be faster and better, and without describing the current situation or what's wrong with the current situation, you run the risk of actually insulting all the people and saying, because you're too slow, because you're too stupid, because you're working in a really bad way. That's not what it's about. So try to get a shared understanding of what are our pain points, where are we hurting, why are we actually doing this? Connect that to the vision and to the sense of urgency. And this is also why you need to develop your vision and your principles iteratively, because you will learn more and more and get a deeper and more shared understanding of what's actually wrong today and what's not working. What do we need to improve? That will also inform your vision. So it's a constant reinforcing cycle of feedback, where the vision informs the understanding of the problem or where you are, but that also informs what the vision needs to be. And also, this is from the Brothers Heath Switch book, the expression bright spots that I really like. Find and leverage the bright spots. There are probably already things in your organization that are working really well. You have some small island maybe of people who have started working with an agile approach, or as in Telenor's case, we already had a few cross-functional agile teams. We had a big project Kanban board with visualization that was really helping people and providing value. There was a big room planning in one department where everyone got together once a quarter and hashed things out. There were some agile teams in the digital channels that started converging with line organizations and value stream, but would later be a tribe. And if you can show these bright spots and show this is not something consultants packaged methods that's coming from the outside that everyone got to do now. These are actually things that we've seen working inside our own organization and getting around the not invented here syndrome. Also, I'd say beware of a value stream analysis paralysis. So I've seen several organizations where, okay, we're now going to transform into, tribes or agile release trains or requirement areas, depending on your poison when it comes to agile frameworks or skilled agile frameworks. But it's all the same, you have to figure out how should we, what should be the principle for how we lump the teams together, so to speak. How do we form our team of teams? Should it be along value streams, along development value streams, along requirement areas? Should it be customer based, customer journey, customer segment, maybe driven by business, by missions? And it's easy to get stuck in a debate and trying to come up with a perfect solution. Don't worry about that. There is no one or perfect solution. You're always going to, you will have to make compromises. You have to have pragmatic solutions. So get something going, get something working where you get the teams together who actually work, have dependencies, have relationships that should be related. Take your best guess of what is easy to get going with. And that's going to be good enough to get started. And you can always change as you go. And I think this is a remain from well, a lot of companies still does that. There's this big change happening every 3 or 4 or 5 years, and it's very costly, and you have to let people go, and there's negotiations with the union and so on. And once you're done, you're like, no, we don't ever want to go through that again. Let's wait at least a few years. Now we did all this. Let's not touch anything. And that's what's still at the back of people's head. But I suggest take a long-term orientation from the start, be prepared to change iteratively. I also propose that you have some, I'd like to call it change governance. Be clear on, okay, we divide into tribes or agile release trains or whatever based on these goals. This is what we're hoping to achieve. That's what we did at Spotify with the first tribes. We said less dependencies in tribes, or more dependencies within tribes and fewer between tribes. And then we went around and measured and asked people and interviewed them how this actually worked. And we're prepared to make adjustments and changes and move people or squads or have ask them to move. And this is the tweaking that you will have to be prepared to do. But if you've been running this as a project, you've set a new organization and you say, don't touch anything, you probably won't have that governance, you won't have that power or authority or mandate to keep doing changes. So it's important to set up already at the start of the journey. And safe, less, scaled Scrum, the Lean Enterprise book by Jess Humble and others, all great frameworks or methods or collection of practices that you could and should probably be using. But I'd encourage you to use them as a toolbox, use the toolbox approach. I have many issues with SAFe. I'm a certified SAFe program consultant. Among others, it's a big, sell as much training as possible scheme, and many other issues. But still, there's so many golden nuggets in there on how to solve different problems. Really, lots of good principles, lots of good practices. The same for the other ones. So pick and choose, search them for clues on how can we take these parts and see what works for us. And respect and leverage the legacy of the organization. Partner with HR and others to build on and further develop existing leadership profiles, training, values, culture, and so on. The yes and approach that these coaches should be well aware of. I've seen it all too common that you come in and maybe deliver a training, and this is especially true with SAFe. Leading SAFe. Oh, we have this house of lean, and we have these 10 principles, and this is what agile leadership is. And it's like, but we already have leadership profiles, we already have values, we already have all of these things. Excuse me, how is this related to what we already have? Oh, I don't know. I don't have a clue, but that's the old thing. Let's make way for the new things. And you're going to create a very unnecessary tension and conflict with people in HR and others who have been doing this for years and not sure they understand how something that probably from their perspective, to be honest, started in IT is now affecting the way they should be working with leaders in the rest of the organization. So here's a great chance to early on partner with them and have HR and others as partners in this change rather than the opposite. Okay, so now shifting gears a little bit. Well, we mostly talked about how we initiating the change journey and how to organize or drive change to actually what you actually do when you change something, especially using the Spotify model, but lean agile transformations in general. As I mentioned, one thing that you often do then when it's a scaled agile approach, you have some kind of either tribes that release change requirements areas. In Telenor's case, not due to my influence, actually, they had already settled on tribes is the thing, because their sister business unit in Norway had been doing that. So, but the important thing, I believe, whatever method you choose, is to use this to really integrate business and IT through mission-based tribes or mission-based trains, whatever you want to call it. So one key thing to success at Telenor, I believe, was that we were successful in getting product owners from the business to actually become product owners in the squads, in the tribes, and get a product owner tribe lead, who would be the kind of the manager for all the product owners, tending to the whole tribe, also from the business, someone with a strong mandate, trust from the rest of the business, inside IT, if you will. That's an oversimplification, of course. And as I used to joke that now at least you have a hostage within IT that the rest of the business can't shoot at you, but that's the worst case. Best case, they will now start seeing, wow, we have an awesome opportunity here. Every 2 weeks, we can change priorities, we can inform things, we can see results. Every quarter, we have this bigger planning where we can really inform the tactics and strategies and so on. And still, in our business, we're doing yearly plans. We have these big projects thinking far ahead. We're missing a great opportunity here. And they will start driving change. They say, hey, we use OKRs and PA plannings and so on a quarterly level, and we use sprints on 2 or 3 weeks. Shouldn't we adapt so we're able to actually give input and influence what we're doing in the tribes? And the answer is very often yes, yes, we should. So it starts driving that change on the business side. And another thing that's often missed from what I say is one of the successes behind Spotify's tribe is tribal unity that M. Campbell Priddy called it in her book, where she applied Spotify model, so to speak, on agile release train in Australia. So tribal unity to me is everyone understands team building for a team. Tribal unity is team building on a tribe level. How can we instill a sense of team in a team of teams? So the question that we asked at Spotify was, how do we get bigger and still feel small? But really, that question is, how do we increase our impact and still support people feeling like they have access, are part of establishing direction, are autonomous and trusted, and have a strong sense of relatedness? So really investing in this relatedness, gelling people together, so that people not only know who to go to for help, know that these guys and girls, they're part of the same organization, or they're my peers. I know who they are, I know who to go to for help, and we have a relationship, so I will also help them, and I will not hesitate to ask them for help. So we invested in doing, like many will do, team kickstarts. We do the tribe kickstart for every tribe that we started at Telenor. You can see an example of the agenda here. So, and also connected to this, at Spotify, one of the key feature at Spotify, I would say, is the autonomous squad, a very misunderstood concept in the rest of the world. Autonomous at Spotify very much was about having the team be able to influence what we are building, what we are doing. Autonomous in other parts of the world, in bigger traditional organizations, seems to mean that we can actually deliver things without being technically dependent on other teams, which is not the same thing. So when we're able to resolve our technical dependencies to other teams, people will say, great, now we're autonomous. We still get the project specification, we still get some people from the business or whatever who tells us exactly what to do, and we're just supposed to execute it. That's not autonomy. So unfortunately, it's not been a lot written about this from Spotify or others. But fortunately, on the other hand, we have Marty Kagan, author of Inspired, who recently released this book, Empowered, about empowered product teams. And what he describes, and there's plenty of blog posts on this website that's mentioned here, is exactly that, autonomous squads at Spotify. He even uses autonomous squads as an example in some of his writing. And one of his disciples was Jeff Patton, who was very influential. So I brought him in and trained all the product owners, all the engineering managers, all the designers at Spotify when we were so small they could still fit into one room and one class. Thanks to Crisp actually for supplying him. But in short, it's really about minimizing output and maximizing outcome. If you have a customer-vendor relationship, that anti-pattern where the business side acts as customer who orders things from IT who acts as vendors, well, you will get a shirk or confusing responsibility where one is supposed to come up with, okay, we have unsatisfied customers and we have these needs and so on. Oh, let's come up with some ideas, products, features, enhancements, right specifications, requirements. And then hopefully it will lead to an outcome in the end. But then we hand it over to IT. They are supposed to deliver this. How are they making sure that they're doing the right thing? Well, the only thing they have to go on is, are we doing the product? Are we doing the feature? Are we following the specification? Actual outcome that the world is changing, that we see changed user behavior that leads to revenue and brand recognition or whatever. That's not us. That's not our responsibility to care for. This is what you need to change. So putting the tools and the means in the hands of the teams to be able to do that, as Henrik has illustrated so great here, move from opinions to data. We're working on X because Sam said it's important. We're done when Sam is okay with it. No, we're working on X because we think it's going to have impact Y, which matters to Telenor because of Z. We're done when the metrics have moved. And that is what really can empower a team. But that means that you need to put practices in place, at least have demos with actual customers, whether they're internal or not, or ideally to be able to release software so often and frequently and have the telemetrics and means of actually accessing data on how it's used and appreciated to make it possible to move the decisions. If you're only making decisions, oh, we have a year-one long project and then we'll know if it's the right one or not. All the decisions during that year, who will make them? Well, it has to be some manager or the other because we have no real means of asking the customer. And this in turn means that the product owners need to be collaborative leaders who can merge all these perspectives. The product owners who understand the business understanding of what's valuable, how does their organization make money? The user experience and designers understanding of what's usable, what does the user need, understanding the user. But also then the engineering side understanding of what's actually possible, how does this fit with legacy systems, what are tech trends, what can we actually do? And if you're successful in doing that, a lot of your innovation and creativity will come from engineering and IT. And this is also why you need to double down in and develop agile engineering skills. As you can see from the Telenor material here, it's our most important role, as we said. And that's what didn't used to be the case. It was the case that they actually outsourced that. It was not the most important role at all. And this needs to change. If you really want to be working closely in collaboration, You need to build a culture where engineers are valued, where they want to come to work, but also where you actually encourage them and teach them to be involved and have this kind of initiative. But also enable to build software that is easy to change and easy to understand. And this, I'm afraid to tell you, some of you, means that you need to be prepared to insource. I've been with several clients now who have said, oh, we're not going to touch outsourcing. This is not an issue about outsourcing or not. That's the successful strategy for us. It has been very cost effective. And this is, again, with the vision, develop the vision and principles iteratively, because very soon we'll get into this and start understanding about empowering people, having IT and business work together and really empowering the teams. Well, is it our outsourced offshore partners, engineers, that we rely on understanding our vision and really being empowered and understanding our values and innovating? Is it them that we want our leaders and managers to develop capabilities with? Probably not. So even if you don't think it, prepare to insource if you're doing a lean agile transformation. Maybe not all of it, but some. And I believe this is also why the chapter concept of Spotify is so popular with many bigger organizations, because you need to rebuild your engineering organization. I was a little bit skeptic to Spotify's chapter model because I think it leads to specialization. But this is something you really want to do when you're transforming. We need to establish a great backend Java culture. We need to establish a great Scrum Master culture. And we need a leader who can work with that one competency. If you're a manager for 40 people with all our different specialists and skills, it's going to be very hard to help build that culture together with them. And this means that you also need your leaders to become more catalysts, servant leaders, developing people rather than being the experts or people who are expected to make decisions and so on. Another thing that I was a skeptic to already at Spotify, and I'm still a skeptic to, will this work anywhere else, is the Potluck. The product owner, team lead, and agile coach, or if you want, the product owner, manager, and scrum master, the squad trio, working together and really supporting the squad. It turns out really in these transformations, maybe you have a PO from the business, a totally different organization, a junior scrum master who isn't used to talking naturally to the product owner, maybe a manager who's used to be or is the scrum master's manager, and typically no place for them to meet, no forum, no context where they actually meet together and see what's our shared responsibility, leading to all sorts of different questions. But what's my responsibility? What's the scrum master's responsibility? What's the product owner's responsibility? And they ask for document and documentation and instructions. No, you're all responsible. You all have a holistic responsible for making this squad work the best it can. How do you challenge, grow, and support it? And how do you support each other and grow and challenge each other? So if you haven't done that, if you're in the lean agile transformation, start a weekly meeting between these three roles that are close to the squad. I promise it will do wonders. I've got 6 minutes left, right? No?
Yes,
Jenny?
sorry.
Okay.
You have 10 minutes left as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Slow down now. So, lean agile budgeting for aligned autonomy, as we call it. So when you are autonomous, you have lots of squads, lots of people who are supposed to make their own decisions, but we still want them to collaborate and not step on each other's toes, not unnecessarily reinvent the wheel. A very big shift, important shift to leverage this autonomy and the power of agile teams is to get rid of the project-driven, plan-driven way of budgeting the organization and steering the organization. It's complete with you need to tie up resources very early on in the project, complete this jigsaw puzzle of resources, and then as soon as anything goes wrong, the whole puzzle needs to be remapped or relaid. And of course, the way to avoid that is to plan even more into detail in upfront, where you have the least learning, the least information, and it's just a vicious circle that leads to delays and cost and so on. So instead, capacity, that should be fixed more or less, because it's very slow to adjust, firing, hiring, and training. The number of squads, we set that. We say, okay, this tribe has this mission, this many headcount, this big of a tribe. We can maybe change it quarterly if we're lucky, maybe 2 times a year or 1 time a year. It's slow, but the good thing is when we work in an agile way, the product content, what we actually deliver, is easy to fix because we deliver incrementally. Anything that we haven't started yet can be replaced at minimal cost. We can have small and frequent releases, and we can change this lever on a weekly basis. And this is easy. Budgeting is done, easy. It's just the cost of the squads. Then we just make our best to ensure that the value exceeds the cost of the squad. So the portfolio model that we would use at Spotify and that we also started using at Telenor is a portfolio of tribes really that have different missions. And if we want, that are goal driven. If we want to give more for creator, for artists at Spotify, we increase that lever a little bit. And maybe then we have to decrease user engagement or onboarding or growth marketing. And those are the big levers that we can choose to pull. And then we use a lean portfolio management system instead of going through a big project list and repuzzling it all the time. But there are great resources online on this. I'm not going to go into detail. Also using OKRs to have goal-driven tribes, not steered by projects, but actual objectives that are informed in dialogues quarterly instead of yearly plans that are broken down and cascaded through the organization. And planning season was something we used to be able to do this quarterly. We had CXOs align and set top objectives each quarter ahead of a pre-planning with product owners and scrum masters to prepare the ground for the big room planning event, 1 to 2 days, where squads would safe style get together during 2 days and handshake dependencies and figure things out, and with all the managers needed to readjust goals and priorities, resolve conflicts immediately, and then work on it. And if you haven't seen this, the power of putting everyone, having these clear tribes, clear squads with missions and product owners and people that are long-term and stable, and having them meet every quarter for 2 days, figuring out who's who and who's doing what, that fosters a network and relationships that gradually makes it possible to have continuously all these dialogues and meetings and so on about dependencies. Which is very different from the project-driven approach. And what we saw at Telenor was that we started a little bit with 5 different tribes, and then there were 3 other tribes or 4 that said, okay, we want to do that too. We also want to be in there. And all of a sudden, there's a 2-day event in the cafeteria every quarter where the CEO, the CTO, the CIO are all on stage and talking about things. And they learn that if you want to get something done, well, you have to wait for the big room planning. I want to sit at that table too. So the rest of the organization started coming up with, we are also a tribe. We were like, what? You don't even have developers? No, but we want to sit at the table. We also want to be in big room planning. This became a huge marketing event, like a vortex that sucked people into the transformation. They now wanted to be part of it. I've actually not seen that effect of it before, of acting as a marketing event. At the end, we had 68 teams participating in this big room planning. So how did it go? Well, we reduced the cycle time from 170 to 70 days, 27 days for a certain type of change request. The time was spent on development rather than other non-engineering things increased from 25 to 48%. Overhead in terms of extra administrative costs was severely reduced. But the crown of it all that makes me so happy is that the employee engagement index for IT, most effective, increased from 22% worst in all of Telenor to 58% in less than, or just 2 years, which was unseen, unprecedented results that actually had the organization doing the research asking, what did you do? How could this be? How is it possible? And also Adobe said that out of all our customers that we have in the Nordics, Telenor Sweden has the strongest momentum in their digital transformation. We even struggle to find comparable companies in Europe when they invited Telenor to speak at a conference. And they still have people lined up from all over the world. People are coming from New Zealand, Australia to visit Telenor. Well, not in COVID times maybe, but before that. So something worked at least. That's it. Thank you for attention. I think I used up all the time and no time for questions, unfortunately. But I'll hang around during the break, and I'm accessible on chat and email and so on. Thank you.
Actually, Joakim, we have one question if you have time to answer that.
Yes, I have time.
There's from Marcus. In our company, there's a debate about having several epic backlogs, which causes unclear prio. Any suggestions? Keep it or move to one backlog for epics?
Oh, it's unfortunately it's the consultant's answer. It depends. To which you should always then ask the question, what does it depend on? And that's harder than for the consultants to answer. So I don't know if you have several epic backlogs, it sounds to me like you have too many epics. One thing that I've seen when people, organizations move to the state, for instance, is that, oh, okay, instead of steering with projects, we now can use epics to specify everything that should be done by the different trains or so on. In my view, and if you read SAFe closely, it's more about how can we make it so that each tribe or agile release train can, based on a goal, control their own destiny, choose what they need to do. It doesn't even have to be epics. It only has to be an epic if it involves several tribes, if it's really cross-cutting, or if it's on a segment or sliced in such a way that that it's actually there's no appropriate tribe for it. So many need to be involved, or it's outside of a tribe's mission. Then I would say use an epic. But other than that, it should be up to the different tribes. But yeah, I'm sorry, I need to know more specifics too.
He was agreeing to, yes, we have way too many epics. Yeah, we have another question as well. Any suggestions to handle dependencies between different tribes and still be able to publish one roadmap and create one release plan?
Well, if you haven't done it already, so what I found that we did at Telenor, which is also not common, safe practice at least, is that we had this 2-day event that we had all squads, all 68 squads participating at the same time in this big room. Then they broke out, of course, based on their tribes and in smaller plannings. But that's one way of actually having all the tribes get together in both, and also in the pre-planning leading up to the tribe, you had all the product owners from all the squads. And if you're not doing that, I'd suggest starting with having all tribes plan on the same cadence and actually be in the same room at the same big room event, if possible. You don't have to have all of them. You can have representatives in, say, a cafeteria like we did at Telenor. And hopefully then you will also establish the communication paths and network to be able to continuously follow up. I would also have what we call it Spotify structure just happens. So if there are dependencies during a certain period of time, you will have a stand-up with all team members from all those teams or representatives if it's really big. And then once that's done, you just take it down. But yeah, that's off the cuff. That's all I can say. These consulting type questions is, well, shoot me an email. I would be happy to set up a chat and understand it more deeply and maybe help you more. You have my email here.
All right. Thank you so much, Joakim.